So a buyer challenged Rabba. The first challenge we had to Rabba was Rav Yosef, okay? And the second challenge that we dealt with yesterday was a buyer. And he was talking about if an olah is his offering, and it implies that an offering is only valid when it is his offering, meaning the original owners, but not when one is stolen. Now, if that's the case, as we discussed, that the stolen animal is coming to be excluded from the thief, it's obvious. You don't need a brisa to teach you that if you're committing an act that's disdainful to Hashem, you can't bring it as an offering. So what we're saying here is that, is this a proof maybe that if the owner despairs and then the thief waits a sufficient period of time, that it now becomes the thief, and if he is caught out eventually, he only has to reimburse the original owner with a financial equivalent. So the answer, according to a buyer's challenge to Rabba, is that's not the case, because the case of it is when the original owner despairs after a period of time, we can learn from this that the owner's despair does not affect acquisition, because the brisa isn't trying to teach you the obvious that if something's stolen, you're not allowed to sacrifice it. It's actually proposing that if you wait a sufficient time for the original owner to despair of having recovered it, the thief now could think he could keep it and then consecrate it as an olah offering. And this brisa is saying, no, it remains there, it remains invalid in that particular case. So therefore, this is a proof against the fact that despair affects acquisition. Okay, that's the proof that he's got. Then the Gemara digresses, and it says, look, it's deflecting the challenge. Now, the first challenge, as we said, was Rav Yosef to a buyer. This challenge with the olah offering is a buyer to Rabba, not Rav Yosef to Rabba. But if you remember the contemporary adversaries, when I say adversaries, it was all the Shem Shemaim, was you often had Rav and Shmuel, and you often had a buyer and Rava. So now Rava doesn't agree with a buyer that this is a proof, because he's saying to him, look, you're coming under the assumption that we're taking a perfectly intact living animal from the homeowner and basically stealing it, waiting for a sufficient amount of time to come about where the owner despairs of having recovered it, and then the thief is still not allowed to sacrifice it because it's not accepted as an olah offering, and you using that as a proof to the fact that despair does not affect acquisition. But it's based on a premise that you're assuming that it was a living animal stolen from the homeowner's home. So that's a mistake. And he deflects it by saying, look, if that's the case, how are you going to explain the following brisa? Okay, we're talking now, he's saying, Rava saying to Abai, if you look at the Zav, and you look at Vayikra Leviticus in this week's Parshas, Kevin astutely pointed out yesterday, chapter 15, verse 5, what is a Zav? It's a man who experiences a series of specific type of seminal emissions. And if a Zav lies on his own couch, or actually any article designated for use, whether he lies on it or rests on it or he touches something, it becomes avatuma. And that means that anybody else that sits on his couch, his food gets infected, his drink, his clothing, himself, etc. So it's known as tumas mishkav, which means a couch tuma specifically, but it becomes in the category of avatuma. Now, what we learn from this is that it's only when it's his couch. So if he comes to somebody for an evening meal, it doesn't mean that the person has to call in the fumigators and the disinfectant squad to get the whole place free of avatuma, because one can only affect their own items, not items that belong to somebody else. And that includes a friend, or it can include stolen items. Tosfot said it includes both items that are not his own and an item that he perhaps stole. Rashi turns around and said it's an item that he stole, specifically. Okay? If you take the literal meaning, it doesn't just extend. But the point of it saying his couch, meaning his couch gets avatuma, but not the rest. So the first proposition is that Rava is saying to a buyer, look, you can't confuse this and come back to me and say it's about a thief that stole a couch where he finished it. In other words, he stole wool and a bit of fabric, and overthrow a bit of upholstery and put together a couch, because that's not the discussion here. Everybody agrees, whether it's Rav Yosef or Rava, that anybody that makes a physical change to an article that he steals affects acquisition. So Rava is saying to a buyer, let's not confuse this brisa, because I know you might be coming to say that it's talking about a couch that the thief has changed. And what I'm saying to here is he stole a finished couch, which means that you can only draw one conclusion. Right? And that is that in that particular case, this is a proof that actually your postulation is incorrect, because let's look at what a zav is. A zav is impure until when, guys?
Till the next evening.
If he goes to the mikveh, that's correct.
Yes, it has to weigh, yeah.
Yeah. So the point.
But you talk, sorry, Damon, just one step back. You mean manufactured? Then it can makabel tuma if it's manufactured with
okay, so let's take out the word manufacture. I apologize. Let's say that a guy's a thief. He's also got a seminal emission problem. He's got a lot of problems in his life. And what happens is he didn't steal a finished couch. He stole some cushions. He stole maybe a blanket, and he stole a bit of upholstery or whatever. And now he's making a couch. It now becomes his because it's not loose parts anymore. He's finished it up. And therefore, since he made a physical change to it and changed its usefulness and remanufactured it or re-engineered it, it now becomes his in the case of changes effect acquisition. Okay? Now, what Rav is saying to a buyer is we're not talking about this case, because it's obvious that both Rava and Rav Yosef both agree, even though they're on conflicting opinions whether or not despair affects acquisition, they're on agreement as far as physical changes affecting acquisition. So he's saying, listen, it can't be talking about a couch where there was a physical change. It's talking about a finished couch. And why did he talk about a finished couch? Because he's saying, leave changes out of the issue. Let's talk about an item that's finished. So you can't say that the change affects the acquisition. So what can affect the acquisition? Despair. And the reason that it's a problem in this case is that a person that has a few items stolen doesn't despair by the time the zav gets himself cleaned up, because he's gone to the mikveh in time. You don't despair after a day, Kevin. So therefore, it's a proof that despair can affect acquisition, but no despair has taken place at this particular point. Okay, the bottom line is as follows, is that Rava is saying to a buyer, just like you're talking about a finished couch here, so too as far as a consecrated animal, you're talking about a consecrated animal that was stolen in the premises of the Beis HaMikdash. It's hekdesh, it's holy, it's a sign for that, and now he wants to take it to another kohen to sacrifice. So Rava is saying to a buyer, got the case wrong. You thought it was a case where a living animal was stolen from the homeowner. Eventually, there was enough time where the thief waited until the original owner gave up on thinking he'd get it back. And he thought he could then sacrifice it, but it was rejected because it now becomes puzzle. The original owner can't touch it, neither can the thief. And therefore, that's proof that despair doesn't affect acquisition. But Rava is saying to a buyer, it's not the case. Just like the zav in the finished couch, where you've already eliminated the fact that the change affects the acquisition. You're not changing it from a living animal to a slaughtered animal. You're taking something that's consecrated to something that's consecrated. And even a buyer would agree that in that case, despair doesn't affect acquisition. Why? Because Rava has a rule, is that in order to affect acquisition through despair, it has to be combined with having been stolen from the homeowner's premises. Because if you've already taken to your money to a location and donated it or put it in the bank or whatever the case may be, if it's out of your property and you think you've done what you've had to do, the original owner made it hekdesh, he made it consecrated, he did his job. If it gets stolen from the temple, it has nothing to do with the original owner. Firstly, he's going to have no clue it's gone missing. That's number one. Because he's not watching it. It's not in his house. So therefore, no despair will take place. And he's already done what he's had to do. So this is not a good proof that despair affects acquisition. Am I making sense to you guys? I can't hear you, Gav. You're on mute.
Repeat the last point. The proof that despair affects acquisition because he hasn't given up on it. That's why it can't be.
No. I'm saying things more deeper than that. Gav, are you with me? You were going to ask something.
No. I was just going to say that the proof that with the items not changing. See, with the one proof you gave with the couch, and you gave, you take 3 or 4 different separate elements, the legs and some material, and you manage to put together a couch. So then it becomes your own thing, and there acquisition is takes place not due to despair, but due to the fact that that has changed its properties. And then when it comes, and the other example that you gave us is, maybe Kevin, this will help you as well, and on the other example you gave us, and now I've gone blank, Damon, sorry.
It's okay. So Rava is saying
what was the other example? No, I'll explain it to you. The other example was...
No, but it's not another example, because Rava is saying to a buyer, listen, the brisa I'm bringing with regards to a zav and a couch, we're not talking about a couch that still has a physical change to it, because we've already dealt with that issue. Both Rava and Rav Yosef agrees the physical change makes it the thieves. So Rava is saying to buy, I'm not talking about a couch that the change took place. I'm talking about a finished couch. That's what the Bryce is talking about. And he's saying, just like the couch is finished and in its finished state, so too with the Olah offering, if it's already consecrated.
Yeah, that's what I was coming to. That's what I forgot. Sorry, thanks. No, it's fine.
Sorry.
it's fine.
So Damon, it's the same.
I forgot that section. All right.
It's the same scenario. Sorry, Gavin.
No, you go ahead. No,
the same scenario. It's the same scenario where the guy stole a lamb and it developed into a ram. So it's a different.
No. It's not at all. So what we're doing is okay. So let me just lay it out for you.
Changed form.
No. We're mixing some things up. Okay, so let's just go blow by blow. Okay. Rabbi is saying, he starts off by saying, Rabbi in the 66 stuff, he says, look, change, I've given you 2 biblical proofs in Deuteronomy, and I've given you 1 biblical proof in Leviticus. The 1 proof in Deuteronomy was about the harlot. Okay. The other proof in was about if he shall return, it was talking about returning a stolen item that was stolen. And there was a superfluous word, and it was stolen, meaning that it has to be returned in the same state that it was stolen. In other words, there has to be, if you can't, if there's any change that's taken place, then you have to do the financial compensation. The bottom line is, Rabbi said, we don't know if it's biblical enactment with regards to despair or rabbinic. So as far as a change of physical properties is concerned, Rabbi is very clear that it's the biblical examples given. But as far as despair is concerned, he said that if you want to mimic in Bava Kamma, let me just hold it a second, Gav, because he's going to a quieter spot. If you want to mimic in Bava Kamma the fact that if a founder found an object that the original owner despaired of, he doesn't have to recompensate him. As far as that's concerned, then maybe the case of the thief is the same. Or he's saying maybe it's not the same with the case of the thief, because despair happened before the person found the object, whereas the thief stole it before despair kicked into place, and it was an illegal act. So therefore, he's not sure if it's biblical and rabbinic or just rabbinic. Why is there rabbinical enactment? We explained, as far as a change that despair that takes place, is so that the person, not for a change, as far as despair has taken place, so that a person can make teshuvah. Because if you've already damaged the thing, or you lost it, or whatever, you want to be able to make teshuvah and make the financial equivalent. So there is a rabbinical enactment as far as despair is concerned. We don't know if it's biblical. That's what Rabbi is saying. He doesn't know if it's both, or just rabbinic. So now Rabbi is saying that's his view. Okay. So then Rav Yosef's saying, look, I don't think that that's the case, because when we take about the chametz and Pesach, then he returns it to the original owner, and the original owner despairs of it because he doesn't want this on Pesach. And therefore, since the original owner despairs, why doesn't the thief just buy him, give him the cash equivalent of the whiskey he stole? Why does he have to give him back the original? So this is a proof that despair doesn't affect acquisition. And Rabbi turns around and says, no, it's not the case. In this case, the thief doesn't want the object, and neither does the person that he stole the object from, because it's both now prohibited from any sort of benefit. So you could only have a case of despair when there's somebody that wants to steal the item on purpose anyway. So in other words, both parties have to agree. It's certainly the thief. In other words, if as the thief I don't want something because it's worthless, why would you despair as the original owner? Do you get what I'm saying? The thief doesn't want it on Pesach because he can't sell it to a non-Jew. He can't derive benefit after Pesach, and he can't consume benefit during Pesach. So since he doesn't want it, then despair doesn't affect acquisition in that case. It has to be that the thief wants it, and the original owner wants it too. Does that make sense? So that was thrown out. Then there was an argument that a buyer had against Rabbi, who turned around and spoke about this Ola offering. Okay? And then a buyer said to Rabbi, listen, the very fact that we learned from this brisa isn't teaching the obvious, because if despair never kicked in, obviously something you stole you can't put on the temple. So the thief waited for despair to kick in, and still it didn't work. So therefore, this is a proof that despair does not affect acquisition. Okay? And then Rava has got an argument with the buyer and says it's not correct, because you're interpreting it on a false premise. You are saying that the animal was stolen from the guy's home, and at the end of the day, it was then consecrated, and it was unaccepted. So obviously in that case, it's not. And I'll give you an analogy, he said. He said, you talk about a brisa with a gazav and a couch. So his couch is avatuma, but not a couch that he steals. Okay? And no despair is kicked in. Why? Because the zav is going to get cleaned by the next evening, so the person hasn't despaired as of yet. There's no despair that's kicked in. We're not talking about a changed couch, because both Rabba and Rav Yosef agree that physical changes affect acquisition. So I'm not going to bring a brisa where they both agree. I'm going to bring a brisa where they disagree, because you agree with Rav Yosef and I agree with Rabba. So basically, just like a finished couch is completed at that point and doesn't affect acquisition because there's not enough time period for despair, etc. We're talking about here a finished consecration where the homeowner already took it and dedicated it to Hekdesh, holy purposes, to the Beis HaMikdash, and the drama happened there where the one person stole it and wanted to take it to the other Kohen to sacrifice it. So that's not even Rabbi would agree that's not a problem. Why? Because the original owner doesn't know it's missing, so there's no despair. So that can't affect acquisition. It's not a proof that if despair affects acquisition, the original owner thinks it's at the temple store. And he's given it already. So what is he despairing of? He's done the mitzvah. There's no despair in that case. So you can't use this as a proof that if the thief waited long enough, that the sacrifice would be pasul, because not only can the thief not use it, but the original owner can't. Any consecration that was then stolen is invalidated for all parties. And therefore, that's an exceptional case. Rabba wouldn't be talking about that case either.
James?
Yeah?
Damon? What happens if the guy gave the money in despair to the temple?
What do you mean, but?
He despaired giving it. Didn't want to really give, but he gave it in despair. Like a lot. A joke, James, a joke.
Okay.
As in despair.
Okay, I despair of the humor of this group. We need to.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Well, I appreciate it. It's nice to see you, by the way. So listen.
Arthur,
At least you know I'm listening.
100%.
sorry.
Damon.
I wanted to make a quick joke about despair. Can I do it or not?
Sure.
Arthur, if you have 4 pairs and you lose 2 of them, do you despair of them?
Just say that again. I missed that. What?
If you have 2 pairs that you bought from the 6 pairs and you've lost 2 of them, you only have 4, you despair of them. Was it a fruitless exercise, Arthur?
Yeah, no,
to despair of them.
Sometimes, I mean, I have a dream of a wigwam and a TP, and I feel I'm 2 tenths. So it's just a little joke.
Yeah, I'm getting 2 tenths at the moment as well. Let's get back to
Sorry, guys. Okay.
right. So listen, guys, does it make sense what I'm saying? Is anybody not following?
It's
No,
a
I'm
lot
following.
it's a lot of information, and it's
Okay, the bottom line is in 2 sentences. You've got to know that Rabba believes that despair affects acquisition. He's not sure if it's just rabbinic or it's rabbinic and biblical. Okay, and Rav Yosef feels it does not affect acquisition. Okay, and Abaya feels it does not affect acquisition, and Rava feels it does, like rubber, affect acquisition. That's where we're holding.
so when you say affect acquisition, it means that the owner basically it's what's the word? It's hefka, and it can be the thief can actually own it. Then is that what it means? It's not going to be owned by the original owner anymore.
Okay, but yes, but compensation is due, meaning
so they can't. Yeah,
it's not a free gift. You've stolen it. So in other words,
it has to be compensated for.
Correct. You have to pay the financial equivalent. In terms of if there are penalties due and everything else, that's a separate discussion.
And going back to the chametz, so the thief stole whiskey. Obviously, long before the vedikat chametz, and then the owner didn't realize, or maybe he realized, but he despaired of it. But he was still the owner, because it can't be that the guy that stole it is not the owner. So he's not. So I'm just trying to figure out
okay,
why.
So I'll explain it to you. Let's take a case. Purim is just passed. I got fraught drunk, okay? And I thought I'd play a practical joke on my mate by taking his prize whiskey and taking it to my place. But I never really maybe intended to steal it. I wanted to play a practical joke on him because after a couple of drinks, my sensitivity and my sense of judgment got impaired. And then I put it, because I was going to return it to him, but I completely forgot about it because I was I crawled home. I was barely sober. So
Yeah.
What happens is about a month later when it was Pesach, I was doing my cleaning and found my mate's whiskey, and it suddenly dawned on me that I hadn't returned it. Okay? But I only clicked. Once I did the checking of Chometz virtually.
Vedikat chametz, yeah.
Yeah, and then I clicked at the last second. So it was, so I took it back to the original person I stole it from, and I said to him, take it. And he says, no. I said, listen, it hasn't inherently lost value. It is the same as I stole it in terms of physical properties. Nothing's changed. And he doesn't really want to accept it. So what happens there is Rav Yosef is saying, well, then that's fine. But then since I have despaired of it, because I'm despairing that I'm going to get the value back because Pesach's coming in, I can't use it. It's not that I might have despaired because I realized it was stolen. But even if I never despaired before then, I'm now despairing because the Jew that's holding it can't keep it. It's puzzle. And he can't derive benefit, and I can't derive benefit now or later, and it's too late to sell it to a non-Jew.
Yeah. So he's the owner, and you're not allowed to own chametz during Pesach.
Correct. So the thief can't own it, okay? And the original owner can't own it. So there's despair because the thief doesn't want it now, and the original owner doesn't want it. So Rav Yosef is saying, well, why can't the thief then just give him financial equivalent? Because he stole it, since despair has effected acquisition. He should be able to say, fine, now I've acquired the whiskey, and let me give you the financial equivalent. So that's proof. Rav Yosef is saying that despair doesn't affect acquisition. And Rabbi is saying that's not true. The reason that despair doesn't affect acquisition in this case is that the thief doesn't want it either. It has to be a case where the person wants the stolen item, the person that stole it. Then he steals it because he wants it, and the other guy despairs of getting it back. Somebody that finds an article and doesn't keep it, what has he got? A thief that realizes he's got something worthless doesn't keep it. So despair can only affect acquisition, now we've learned, on two factors. One, that the thief wants it, and number two, that it's stolen from the homeowner's home, according to Rabbah. Not from Hekdesh, not from any other place, but when he realizes it's gone from his home. Those are the two criteria. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to explain it, but the bottom line is he can't own it and the thief can't own it. So it's like the thief can't acquire it. Maybe after Pesach, the thief can it's in limbo. It's not
well, because if you've got it under you can't get derived benefit after Pesach. Otherwise, we would all otherwise we wouldn't sell it to non-Jews. We'd lock it in a cupboard. Yeah.
So the thief can't, even after Pesach, can't derive benefit from it, or can't acquire it.
No, he can't. So I don't. If you found it that last minute, I think I don't know how the halacha would go, but the halacha would obviously, to me, be that the person that was stolen from would have to be financially compensated. But that's not proof that despair affects acquisition, because the thief doesn't, in this case, acquire the whiskey. He just has a loss all around.
And he has to compensate the owner he stole it from.
Yeah, why was it the owner's problem?
He's not he can't keep it. Then he can't keep it.
Correct. You're obviously assuming the guy clicked just before Pesach when he couldn't sell it to a non-Jew in the next town for half the price. But even if he got half the price, it's not the original owner's fault. He has to recompensate him for what it was worth at the time of theft.
No.
And pay double.
And the thief can't benefit as well, eh?
Correct. He's a Jew.
Yes.
So, and he can't benefit in any way. So he can't even give that bottle of whiskey away as a present after Pesach.
No, I don't think you can.
And not can you give it to a goy as a gift?
No, you can't even, for example, because that derives benefit of goodwill.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
He's not the owner. He can't be an owner. He can't. He's not allowed to do anything with it. Then.
Correct.
So Damon, you said he virtually